The world of technology often feels like a double-edged sword, offering incredible convenience and endless possibilities, but also hiding shadows where dark forces can manipulate it for their own gain. In the heart of this chaotic web of zeros and ones, one unsuspecting individual was about to become entangled in a web of deceit, danger, and digital theft. This is the story of what happens when personal information becomes currency and trust turns into a weapon of mass destruction. A single click, a minor slip-up, and lives can change forever. It was a crisp autumn evening when Jason, an ambitious software developer, returned home to his sleek downtown apartment. He had just wrapped up a long day of coding for a blockchain startup, a company whose primary product was a cryptocurrency exchange. The company, though still in its early stages, was beginning to make a name for itself, and Jason couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment with each passing day. He loved the challenge, solving complex algorithms, debugging code, and making sense of numbers and strings of text that seemed to have a life of their own. As he kicked off his shoes and dropped his jacket on the couch, Jason's phone buzzed in his pocket. It was a notification from his bank, alerting him of a withdrawal from his personal account. The amount wasn't significant, just a small charge for a subscription service he'd forgotten about. No big deal, he thought, and swiped the notification away. But then another buzz came, followed by another. This time, it wasn't his bank account. It was his crypto wallet app. The notifications piled up rapidly, one after the other. Withdrawals, transfers, tokens being swapped. Jason's heart sank as he opened the app, his eyes widening in horror. His balance had dropped to zero. Gone. All of it. For a moment, he sat there, stunned, trying to make sense of what had just happened. How could someone have drained his account without him knowing? He hadn't made any transactions. He hadn't even opened his wallet app recently, aside from the occasional check-in to see his investments grow. Frantically, Jason started to swipe through his phone, opening email after email from his bank and crypto platform, all with the same alarming subject lines. Suspicious activity detected. One of the emails detailed a series of transactions, all originating from his account, but none of them he had authorized. The transfers led to wallets he didn't recognize, some connected to obscure exchanges, others with transactions that seemed to link back to criminal syndicates that operated in the shadows of the dark web. Panic began to set in as Jason realized the full extent of what had occurred. His hard-earned savings were gone. His investments vanished. But what disturbed him most was the method used to steal everything from him. It wasn't through a hacked password or a forgotten security question. No, this was something far more sophisticated. Something he had heard rumors about but never thought he would encounter. It was a SIM swap. Back at the crypto exchange office, Tyler, the CEO of the company, was dealing with his own crisis. Over the past 24 hours, he had received a series of alerts about strange login attempts and unauthorized access to user accounts. Dozens of customers, including some high-profile investors, had reported their funds being stolen. The situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, and Tyler knew that his company's reputation was hanging by a thread. Tyler's first instinct was to blame a potential hack in their system. Maybe someone had found a backdoor in the exchange's software. But as he dug deeper into the situation, something didn't add up. The compromised accounts weren't just users who had their passwords stolen. No, the attackers had complete control of their accounts, changing the phone numbers linked to the accounts and bypassing multi-factor authentication systems. It was a well-coordinated attack, executed with precision. Tyler made a call to his lead developer, Sarah, hoping she might have a clue about what was going on. Sarah, I think we've got a serious problem. This isn't just a hack. We're dealing with a SIM swapping operation. The accounts are being hijacked one by one, and it looks like the attackers are specifically targeting our crypto users. Sarah's voice crackled through the speaker. A SIM swap? Are you sure? That's pretty rare. I'm sure, Tyler replied, his tone urgent. They're bypassing our multi-factor authentication by taking over the user's phone numbers. Without that, we're helpless. We need to fix this before it gets worse. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, an unassuming teenager named Ethan was finishing his homework in his dimly lit bedroom. Ethan wasn't a criminal, at least not in the traditional sense. He was just a hacker, or rather, someone with a gift for understanding how the digital world worked. a gift that had, over the years, led him to explore the darker corners of the internet. Ethan had discovered SIM swapping quite by accident when he'd hacked into a friend's phone just to prove how easy it was to do. But it wasn't until he realized the potential profits from hijacking cryptocurrency accounts that his fascination with SIM swaps grew into something more. He started with small targets, people with weak security, unaware of the dangers lurking in the digital world. But now, he had a bigger target in his sights: Jason, the developer. Ethan had been watching Jason for weeks. He had managed to acquire his personal details, including the phone number linked to his crypto wallet. All it took was a few social engineering tricks, some fake phone calls, and a little bit of bribery to get a low-level employee at a mobile carrier to do his bidding. Within hours, Ethan had control of Jason's phone number. And with that, he had control of Jason's entire digital life. As Ethan sat back in his chair, grinning at the success of his operation, he couldn't help but feel a rush of adrenaline. He had pulled it off, another successful SIM swap, another account drain. But what Ethan didn't know was that his actions were about to lead him down a dangerous path, one that would cross with forces much larger and more deadly than he had ever imagined. Back at Jason's apartment, the hours were slipping away as he tried to regain control of his stolen assets. He had contacted customer support for both his bank and his crypto wallet, but the responses were slow. The more he dug into the situation, the more he realized that there was little anyone could do to help. The crypto transactions were irreversible, and the mobile carrier had already closed the loophole that allowed the SIM swap to happen. Jason's frustration grew with each passing minute. He had spent years building his career, and in a single night, everything had been ripped away from him. He began to wonder how deep the conspiracy ran. Was it just some random act of digital theft, or was there something bigger at play? The answers were just beyond his reach, and the clock was ticking. As Jason sat there, scrolling through his phone, a chilling thought occurred to him. What if this wasn't the end? What if the attackers were still watching, still waiting, planning their next move? The night crept on, and Jason's anxiety only deepened as he began to understand just how vulnerable his entire existence had become. Everything he had worked for, his career, his investments, his reputation, was now in the hands of faceless criminals. Each notification that came through his phone sent a jolt of panic through his veins, each one another reminder that something was horribly wrong. He had locked himself in his apartment, the walls closing in around him as he tried to get a grasp on the situation. He frantically attempted to reach out to more secure sources, even tried tracking down a hacker he'd once known from his past tech work, a mysterious individual named Elysium. Jason had worked with him on a few side projects in the early days of his career, and though Elysium had been a bit of a shadowy figure, he always came through when things went south. If anyone could track down the attackers, it was him. Jason's fingers trembled as he sent a direct message through an encrypted channel, knowing that this might be his last chance to stop the bleeding. But even as the message sent, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that he had underestimated just how far this web of digital manipulation had stretched. Meanwhile, Tyler was locked in his own battle, facing the aftermath of the attack on his exchange. Customers were in an uproar, with complaints flooding in from all directions. Several high-profile clients, investors with millions of dollars tied up in the platform, had their accounts drained in a matter of hours. Tyler's own personal funds had been affected too. The sheer scope of the theft was staggering. Tyler had never anticipated something like this. Yes, he had always known that the cryptocurrency world was filled with dangers, hacks, scams, and a constant battle for security. But a SIM swapping attack? That was a new level of sophistication, one that caught even the most experienced professionals off guard. He wasn't going to sit idly by. Tyler had a plan. The first thing he did was to assemble his security team, a group of specialists who had helped build the crypto platform's defenses. They spent hours analyzing the data, trying to track down the origin of the attacks. But it wasn't until they uncovered a connection to a phone number linked to Jason that the pieces began to fall into place. Tyler's heart sank when he realized the extent of the threat. Jason had been one of their key developers, someone who knew the ins and outs of the platform. But now, it seemed as though Jason had become a target, a pawn in a larger, more insidious scheme. At the same time, Ethan's life had taken a turn. What had started as a hobby, a game of digital cat and mouse, was now spiraling into something much darker. Each SIM swap he orchestrated gave him a rush, a thrill that could only be matched by the adrenaline coursing through his veins. He had quickly learned the art of manipulation, convincing unsuspecting mobile employees to give him control over high-value accounts. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about power, about proving that he could slip through the cracks of the system without leaving a trace. But as his operations grew, so did his attention from powerful figures in the underworld. The first time he received an encrypted message from an unknown source, Ethan thought it was a joke. He didn't have any ties to the criminal underground. Not yet, anyway. But the message was clear. If he wanted to continue operating at this level, he would need to meet with someone who could show him the ropes. Ethan had always thought of himself as a lone wolf, but this new world was pulling him in. It wasn't long before he found himself in a dark, dimly lit room, staring across a table at a man in a sharp suit. His name was Victor, and he was everything Ethan had never imagined. Victor was smooth, calculated, and dangerous. Someone who played the game on a far more grandiose scale than Ethan had ever dreamed. Victor didn't need to say much. He knew Ethan's capabilities and knew how to exploit them. The deal was simple. Continue doing what he was doing, hijacking SIM cards and draining wallets, but now under Victor's guidance. With the resources of the criminal syndicate behind him, Ethan's reach would expand exponentially. He could make millions, but there was a catch. He was no longer in control of his own fate. Victor's cold eyes never left Ethan's face as he explained the terms of their arrangement. You can keep the rewards, kid, but remember, every transaction you make comes with a cost. And in this world, the price is always higher than you think. Back in the real world, Jason was losing hope. He had received a message from Elysium, his old contact, but it wasn't the comforting response he had hoped for. Elysium had done some digging and, though he couldn't confirm it yet, he had uncovered something chilling. There was more to this attack than just a random hack or a financial crime. Jason's name was on a list of people targeted for something far bigger than just money. Jason's blood ran cold as he read Elysium's message in full. This isn't just about crypto. There are players involved here who want control. Control of information, control of people. You're a small piece in a much larger game. Be careful. The people behind this aren't who they seem to be. The next day, Tyler's worst fears were realized when a security breach occurred that exposed sensitive customer data, including personal identities and account details. The SIM swap operation had gone even further than anyone could have imagined. It wasn't just money that was being stolen. It was something far more valuable: information, influence, and access to a network of high-profile individuals. The authorities were involved now, but even they seemed helpless. The criminals had covered their tracks too well, using encrypted communication and untraceable transactions. It was clear that whoever was behind this had the resources and knowledge to manipulate the digital world to their advantage. For Jason, the situation was becoming more desperate by the hour. He felt as though he was being dragged deeper into a conspiracy, a rabbit hole from which there was no escape. Every move he made seemed to push him further into the shadows. The question haunted him. Who was behind all of this, and why had they chosen him? The game had changed, and Jason was no longer just a victim of theft. He was a player, caught in the middle of a dangerous digital war where nothing was what it seemed, and the stakes were higher than he could ever have imagined. The phone buzzed again. Another alert. Jason's stomach twisted as he saw the name on the screen, Elysium. This time, it wasn't a warning or an update. It was a location. Jason's hands trembled as he quickly typed a reply. "Where are you? What's going on?" The message was simple, but Jason's mind was racing. The last time they spoke, Elysium had seemed cryptic and distant, almost as if he was afraid of what Jason might discover. Now, it was clear. Elysium was more than just a mysterious contact. He was tied into this entire mess, whether Jason liked it or not. The reply came almost immediately. "Meet me at the old warehouse. The one near the docks. Don't trust anyone else, Jason. The walls are closing in." Jason didn't hesitate. He had no idea what he was walking into, but the thought of remaining in his apartment, helpless and out of control, pushed him to act. He grabbed his jacket, stuffed his phone into his pocket, and headed out into the night. The city felt different now. It was colder, quieter, like it too had become aware of the undercurrent of danger that had begun to ripple through it. At the same time, Tyler's life had descended into chaos. The breach at the exchange had grown into something far beyond a simple hack. The authorities were scrambling to find the perpetrators, but every lead seemed to fizzle out, every trace just another dead end. Tyler had never felt more exposed. His entire company, his entire career, was on the verge of collapse. But what terrified him most was the realization that this wasn't just a cybercrime. This was personal. Jason, the talented developer who had worked at his company, was being targeted in ways that went far beyond financial theft. And for some reason, Tyler's name kept coming up in the investigation. The pressure weighed heavily on him. He had been in contact with law enforcement, trying to push them to investigate deeper into the matter, but they seemed more focused on the external hacking group than any internal threat. Tyler knew that if the investigation continued to follow the wrong trail, everything he had built, his company, his reputation, even his life, would be destroyed. He needed to get ahead of this, and fast. He had a meeting scheduled with his senior security officer, Sarah. They needed to figure out who was behind this, and more importantly, why they had gone after Jason. If they could understand the motive, they might be able to track down the criminals responsible. Tyler knew there was more to this story than just money. Jason's name was on the list for a reason, and Tyler had a sinking feeling that this was just the beginning of something much darker. As Jason arrived at the warehouse, a chill ran down his spine. It was late, the night air was thick with fog, and the industrial area was deserted. Just the kind of place for shady dealings to take place. His footsteps echoed on the cracked concrete as he approached the massive structure looming before him. The warehouse had once been a thriving part of the city's manufacturing district, but now it stood empty and abandoned. The windows were boarded up, and the rusting doors looked like they hadn't been opened in years. Jason hesitated for a moment, his mind filled with uncertainty. Was this a trap? Was Elysium setting him up? But before he could think too much about it, the warehouse door creaked open, and a shadow emerged from the darkness. It was Elysium, or at least, the figure in the shadows looked like him. His face was obscured by a hood, but Jason recognized the figure's build and posture. Jason, Elysium's voice was low and urgent. You came. Good. Jason stepped forward, trying to read the figure's expression, but Elysium's face remained hidden in the shadows. I had to, Jason replied. What's going on? Why am I being targeted? Elysium didn't respond immediately. He glanced over his shoulder, as though checking for anyone else nearby before pulling Jason into the warehouse. The door shut behind them with a heavy thud, plunging the two men into near darkness. There's no time to explain everything, Elysium said. But you're in over your head, Jason. This isn't just about your crypto wallet, or some random attack. Whoever is behind this is going after key players, people with access to the kind of data they can manipulate. It's not just about money, it's about control. Information is the real currency now. Jason's heart pounded in his chest. Who's behind this? What do they want? Elysium hesitated, then pulled out a small device from his jacket pocket, a tablet. He handed it to Jason, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. This is what they want. This is the real prize. Jason took the tablet, his fingers trembling as he tapped the screen. It was filled with encrypted files, documents, code, and schematics that seemed to have no end. Some of them were familiar to Jason, especially the code. Lines of blockchain encryption, the kind that he and his colleagues had worked on for months. But the more Jason scrolled, the more it became clear that this wasn't just code. It was something much more significant. The files detailed digital vulnerabilities, backdoors into key systems, and information about government and corporate networks. Data that could bring entire economies to their knees if it fell into the wrong hands. This is madness, Jason whispered. Whoever has this, they could take down the whole system. They could take down the government, entire countries. Elysium nodded gravely. Exactly. And that's why they've targeted you. Your company. You're a part of the infrastructure they're trying to manipulate. Jason looked at the files again, a sense of dread crawling up his spine. This wasn't just about a few $1 million stolen in crypto. This was a much larger operation. Someone was trying to take control of the entire digital world. What do we do now? Jason asked, his voice barely a whisper. Elysium didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached for the tablet and began to wipe the data. We disappear. We can't trust anyone, not even law enforcement. These people are everywhere. And if they know you have this, they'll come after you. But as Elysium spoke, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to take a dark turn. The thought of disappearing, running from the unknown, was terrifying. But there was no turning back now. He had seen too much. And whatever was coming next, he had to face it head-on. Back at the office, Tyler had no idea that Jason was already entangled in something far bigger than he could comprehend. The investigation into the theft was progressing, but there were still so many unanswered questions. Tyler sat in his office, staring at a screen filled with information that didn't make sense, when his phone rang. It was a blocked number. Tyler hesitated before answering. Hello? A voice, distorted and cold, came through the line. You're getting too close, Tyler. You've been warned. Back off. Tyler's blood ran cold. He knew then that his life, just like Jason's, was no longer his own. Whoever was behind this had the power to silence him, to destroy everything he had built. But Tyler wasn't ready to back off. Not yet. As the line went dead, Tyler sat back in his chair, his mind racing. There was no going back now. The digital war had begun, and everyone was a target. The city lights flickered as Jason and Elysium hurried through the shadowed streets. The fog had thickened, making it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead, but they knew better than to let their surroundings lull them into a false sense of security. They were being hunted, tracked by people who had resources far beyond anything Jason could have imagined. It was no longer a game. It was a fight for survival. Jason's mind raced. He couldn't stop thinking about the files on the tablet, the way the encrypted data seemed to have no end. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting cryptocurrency or even information. This was about something far bigger. Control. Power. The manipulation of systems that governed everything from the digital currencies to the very infrastructure of society itself. If the people behind this got what they wanted, the entire world could fall into chaos. They reached a nondescript apartment building, tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Elysium had been vague about his plans, but Jason trusted him, even if only because Elysium was the only lead he had left. They went inside, and Elysium motioned for Jason to sit down at a small table in the corner of the dimly lit room. You're in deeper than you think, Jason, Elysium said, his voice low and strained. They've been watching you for months, maybe even longer. You were just a stepping stone to something much bigger. A tool in a game that's been in motion for years. Jason absorbed the weight of Elysium's words, his mind trying to piece together the puzzle. Who are they? Who's behind this? Why target me? Elysium didn't immediately respond. He paced the room, his eyes darting from corner to corner as though he expected someone to burst in at any moment. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely a whisper. They're not just hackers, Jason. This is a syndicate, a global network of individuals who have infiltrated governments, corporations, financial institutions, everything. They've got their hands in every pie, and the data you have? It's the key to everything. Jason sat in stunned silence. He had always thought the world of cybersecurity was chaotic and dangerous, but this was something on a level he had never imagined. So what now? What are we supposed to do with this data? Elysium's expression darkened. You're going to help me take them down. Jason recoiled at the suggestion. Take them down? How? These people, this syndicate, has more power than we could ever hope to fight. We don't even know who they are. Elysium looked him dead in the eye. We don't need to know who they are. We need to hit them where it hurts. We need to expose everything they've been hiding. The world doesn't know what's coming for it, Jason. But we do. And it's up to us to make sure it doesn't happen. Jason's thoughts were a blur. Elysium was right about one thing. The stakes had escalated far beyond anything he could have anticipated. But the idea of going up against a global syndicate, people who had orchestrated thefts, manipulated systems, and controlled governments, it felt impossible. The risk was overwhelming. He was out of his depth. Elysium placed a hand on Jason's shoulder, pulling him from his spiral of thought. I know this sounds insane, but we have a chance here. If we act quickly, we can shut them down before they make their next move. But you have to trust me. Jason stared at the tablet in his hands, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Could he really trust Elysium? Or was he just another player in a much larger game? Someone with their own agenda? Before he could answer, the phone on the table rang, cutting through the tension like a knife. Elysium's eyes flickered toward it. Without a word, he picked it up, his face paling as he listened intently. Jason couldn't hear the voice on the other end, but he could see the shift in Elysium's demeanor. He grew rigid, his hand tightening around the phone. "They know we're here," Elysium said, his voice low. "We need to go. Now." Jason's heart skipped a beat. He had barely had time to process what was happening before Elysium was already on his feet, motioning for Jason to follow. The door opened quickly, and they moved into the hallway with quick, deliberate steps, each footfall sounding louder in the eerie silence. As they reached the stairwell, Jason's phone buzzed again. It was a message from Tyler. "I know you're involved, Jason. I'm trying to protect you. Meet me at the office. I have information that might help." Jason's mind raced. Tyler? He hadn't heard from him since the investigation had started, and yet here he was, reaching out at the most critical moment. Jason's instincts told him that he needed to follow the lead, but the warning in Elysium's eyes was clear. Time was running out, and meeting Tyler might not be safe. They were already being hunted, and anyone who knew too much could be a target. "We can't trust anyone, Jason," Elysium said, interrupting his thoughts. "The more people you involve, the more chances they have to track us down." But despite Elysium's warning, Jason couldn't shake the feeling that Tyler was the only person who might have the answers they needed. Maybe Tyler had figured something out. Maybe he knew more about the syndicate than Jason realized. "I have to go," Jason said, turning toward the exit. "I'll meet you at the backup location. I'll be careful." Elysium didn't argue, but the look he gave Jason spoke volumes. "Don't do anything stupid. We need to stay one step ahead." Jason nodded, though doubt still lingered in his mind. He had made a choice, and now there was no turning back. As he stepped into the night, the weight of his decision settled over him like a storm cloud. Every step he took felt heavier, the air thick with the sense of impending danger. The hunt was on, and no matter where he went, it was clear that he was being followed. Back at the office, Tyler was pacing. He had been sitting on the information he had gathered for hours, unsure of what to do with it. The encrypted files, the connections between Jason and the syndicate, it all pointed to something huge, something beyond his comprehension. But what if Jason was in danger? What if this entire thing was part of a much larger conspiracy? Just as Tyler made up his mind to call Jason again, his phone rang. It was a blocked number. He answered quickly. "Jason? Is that you?" But the voice on the other end wasn't Jason's. It was a voice he didn't recognize, low, distorted, and ominous. "You're getting too close, Tyler. Back off now, or it's over." The line went dead before Tyler could respond. The threat was clear. Jason's heart pounded in his chest as he approached the office. He had made the decision to meet Tyler, but now, as he stood in front of the building, doubt gnawed at him. The world felt too quiet, too still. It wasn't until he stepped inside that he realized just how wrong everything had gone. The office was dark. No lights, no sounds. It was completely abandoned. Jason's blood ran cold. The silence in the office was suffocating. Jason's eyes scanned the empty space, the once bustling tech hub now cold and desolate. Every step he took echoed unnervingly as he moved deeper into the building, his senses heightened. Something was terribly wrong. Tyler's usual presence, the hum of computers, the flicker of lights, none of it was there. Only a deep, unsettling stillness lingered in the air. Jason's fingers trembled as he pulled out his phone, checking for any new messages or missed calls. The screen remained unchanged. There was no trace of Tyler, no sign of anyone. It was as if the entire office had been abandoned overnight. He moved toward Tyler's office, his steps quickening. The door was slightly ajar, a crack of light spilling out from the inside. Jason pushed it open slowly, his heart racing. The room was empty, but something caught his eye. On the desk, a single sheet of paper. It was hastily scribbled with what appeared to be a set of coordinates, followed by a single sentence in bold, messy handwriting. They know everything. They're coming for you. Jason's mind raced. What was Tyler trying to tell him? Was it a warning? Or a message meant for someone else? The hum of his phone vibrated in his pocket, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a message from an unknown number. Jason's stomach churned as he read the text. You should have listened, Jason. It's too late now. Before he could react, a loud crash from the hallway made him jump. Jason froze, his pulse pounding in his ears. He rushed to the door and peeked around the corner, but saw nothing. Just the flickering light from the hallway, casting long shadows along the walls. Then, another sound. A faint whisper in the distance. He strained to hear it. Jason. His name. It came from somewhere deep within the building. A voice, distorted and low, echoed through the empty space. Jason's breath caught in his throat as his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a picture. An image of his own reflection in a mirror. But it wasn't a mirror in the office. It was the reflection of the abandoned building, the eerie shadow of something or someone standing just behind him. He spun around, but the room was empty. The door slammed shut behind him, and for a brief moment, Jason felt as though the walls themselves were closing in. In a panic, he bolted toward the exit, his heart pounding harder than ever. He had no idea who or what was stalking him, but he knew one thing. He wasn't going to make it out of here alone. Not if he didn't act fast. The buzzing of his phone stopped. There were no more messages. The silence was deafening again. But this time, it felt more dangerous, more suffocating. Jason reached for the door handle. It was locked. No, this couldn't be happening. He looked around, his breath coming in shallow gasps. There had to be another way out. He grabbed the nearest fire extinguisher, ready to break through the glass window and escape. But as he turned back to the window, the lights flickered once again, casting a sudden darkness over the room. From the shadows emerged a figure, one that made Jason's blood run cold. It was a man, tall, dark, and faceless. His body seemed to shimmer in and out of focus, as if his presence itself was an illusion, something not quite real. But the chilling, unnatural calm in his voice was unmistakable. You've seen too much, Jason. You've been warned. Jason's heart skipped a beat as the figure took a step closer. His eyes widened as he realized something horrible. This wasn't just a person. This was the same faceless figure from the photo, his reflection in the mirror. No, please, Jason stammered, trying to back away. His legs felt heavy, unresponsive, as if something was forcing him into place. He couldn't move. The figure tilted its head, as if amused by Jason's fear. It's too late now, the voice rasped. You should have never tried to expose them. Jason tried to scream, but no sound came out. The room seemed to close in on him, the shadows swallowing the light until there was nothing but the suffocating darkness. Suddenly, the door behind him flew open, and the figure vanished into the void. Jason blinked in disbelief, his body still frozen in place. He was no longer alone. Tyler stood in the doorway, his face pale and eyes wide with terror. Get out. Now, he shouted, his voice hoarse. Jason didn't need to be told twice. He turned, scrambling to his feet, and bolted for the door. Tyler grabbed him by the arm and yanked him outside just as the lights flickered one last time. The office building, once a beacon of progress, seemed to collapse in on itself behind them. As they ran into the night, Tyler looked at Jason, his face filled with a mixture of anger and fear. You were right to come, but I should have stopped you from getting involved, he said, his voice shaking. They'll stop at nothing now. Jason looked back toward the building, unsure whether he had just escaped something far worse than a hack, or if it was already too late for both of them. He had uncovered the truth, but that truth had already begun to unravel everything he knew. The people behind this operation weren't just criminals. They were a force, unstoppable, with a plan that was already in motion. As the sound of approaching sirens grew louder, Jason felt a cold shiver run down his spine. The digital war wasn't just happening in cyberspace anymore. It was real, and it was coming for them both. Where do we go from here? Jason asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tyler looked at him, a grim expression on his face. We run. We don't stop. Because if we do, they'll catch us. As they disappeared into the shadows, Jason realized with sickening certainty that there was no escape. The syndicate had won, and they would keep coming for them, one step ahead, until there was no one left to stand in their way. The game was over.